everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. So Mom and I are finally back and recording together.
Yeah.
It's been a little while. This summer, it's funny because it kind of hits in weird waves where we'll have a lot of requests for interviews and then like we're kind of in a down part now with no interviews. I love doing the interviews. This is the heart of the podcast right here, sitting and telling stories. And
and this is a good one.
This is one. I've been researching this one for quite a while, and I talked about this months ago. I was getting ready to do this episode, and then another podcast did this case. And I was just getting ready to research it. And I was like, oh, man. So I thought we'd go ahead and do it now. It's been a few months since they've done it. And this one it's probably one of the more unique episodes we've ever talked about. It has everything from a gruesome murder, a mysterious religious shrine, cults, curses, and it's one of Detroit's most baffling unsolved crimes. Well, we're going back to the summer of 1929 to the home of Benny Evangelista, and he was a well-known Italian immigrant. He was also known as a faith healer and mystic in Detroit. And what happened in that house on St. Aubin Street is still shocking to this day. And like we talked about, despite decades of investigation, the killer has still never been found. So get comfortable, maybe light a candle if it's getting dark where you are, and let's head into one of the most chilling cases in Italian American history. So on the morning of July 3rd, 1929, a man named Vincent Elias showed up at Benny Evangelista's home at 3587 St. Aubin Street in Detroit. And Elias was Benny's real estate agent. He had come over to the house to talk about a business deal. Benny and his family lived in the inner city suburbs of Detroit, but he was wanting to buy a farm, some acreage, to kind of have like a summer home that the family could go to. So Vincent was coming over, probably, have him sign paperwork or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But when he knocked, no one answered. When he peered through a window, he didn't really see anybody, any movement inside the house. So he went ahead and went inside. And he went downstairs to the basement, which was where Benny had his office. And inside, he found Benny slumped over his desk, and his arms were resting on the surface as if he had just simply fallen asleep. Except Benny's head was missing.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. It had been severed cleanly from the body, and it was placed at his feet. And now there's been a couple of articles that I read where it said it was at his feet and a couple of articles where it was on the desk. So keep that in mind. But
It's off anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's not on. It is no longer attached. But no matter where it was, surrounding the head were photographs. And these photographs were reportedly of a young girl about 4 or 5 years old lying in a coffin.
Oh.
So we are off to a very strange start here. Now, upstairs, it got worse. Benny's wife, Santina, and their 4 children, Angelina, Margaret, Mario, and Jean, had all been brutally killed. All but Mario were found in their beds, and each of the children were killed with some sort of a heavy, sharp object, most likely an axe. But Mario, he was still a baby, and so he had been sleeping with Santina in their bed.
Is the baby alive?
No, the baby was found in Santina's arms. And so they were killed in the same bed. Their little bodies, they were covered with blankets as if someone had tucked them in after taking their lives, which is really personal, right? It almost makes you wonder if they knew them.
Right, because why would they? If you're murdering somebody.
Then feel guilty and you're like almost taking care of them. It's weird. And so the scene was so horrific that even the police officers on the case were shaken up over it. One article actually called it the most ghastly murder in Detroit's modern history. So let's back up a little bit and talk about the family history. Benny, he was born Benjamino Evangelista in Italy on June 3rd, 1886, and he came to the U.S. in 1904. When he first came to America, he lived in New York and then in Pennsylvania for a short time before settling in Detroit, Michigan. I think this is actually our first episode that we've ever done in Michigan.
Is it?
I think so. We've done a Wisconsin one, but yeah, I think this is our first Michigan one.
Oh, wow.
What a one to do, too. So Benny married Santina Zanapia. She was also from Italy. And together they had 4 children. And we already talked about the children's names. But if you do look up this case, the names are all over the place. I think the only name that stays consistent is their daughter, Angelina. But Margaret, Mario, and Jean, they are all reported a little differently. So I went off the death certificates.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the names get all mixed up like that.
I don't either. It's so weird to me. I mean, I don't know. I don't get it either. So he worked as a carpenter by trade, but over time, he became something more mysterious to his neighbors. Benny began to call himself a spiritual healer, and some newspapers called him a voodoo priest. Others called him a cult leader. But to many in Detroit's Italian community, he was simply the man who could cure your ailments. But for a price, of course. He wasn't licensed to prescribe medicine, but he could give like medical advice. I don't really know what this was. He actually had a certificate on his wall, like a medical certificate, but it was given to him by a chiropractor. So basically, he got some sort of a medical degree certificate license, but he couldn't prescribe medicine. So, but instead what he would do is he performed divine healings and readings for clients. And according to one story, this actually may have been the way that he met Santina. So Santina, when she came to America, she became ill, and a friend suggested that she go and see Benny. And Benny told her that he would heal her, but only if she married him. So apparently she was healed because she had 4 kids with him. Oh, and one thing that I want to add in, there was a couple of articles that I saw, and I could not verify this, but I'm going to add it in. So take it with a grain of salt. There was a couple of articles that said that Santina was pregnant, like a month away from giving birth when she was killed.
Wow.
So just throwing that out there.
Mm.
Yeah. So during his healing rituals or whatever he did, he would use candles, icons, and incantations, and he would have clients come from all over the city. I saw one paper that said he would have around 75 to 100 clients a day, which that seems
Day.
Doesn't that seem crazy?
That's,
How would you even function?
yeah, that's what, every 2 minutes? Who could see 100 clients a day? So that has to be a misprint.
I totally agree, because you'd think each client, he at least probably spends at the minimum 15 minutes.
Right.
And a lot of these clients actually believed that he had powers. However, there was a lot of people in the city that thought he was a fraud. Now, I want to talk about Benny a little bit, but we're going to go back. So this happened in 1929 when he was murdered, but I want to go back to 1924. I talked about how Benny was a carpenter. And in 1924, he was working on a house on St. Aubin Street, and he reportedly uncovered 2 human shin bones and buttons from a soldier's uniform, but that was the only remains. And so
That's weird.
isn't that weird? I don't know if this house was being remodeled or just had work being done. Somehow Benny discovered this in this home. And a lot of people were talking about how this was found in the basement. And so people were thinking that, I think this house was very old, and that some soldier, maybe from the Civil War era, was buried there. But it's just weird that he found it.
That's what I was wondering, what he was doing to.
And isn't it seem weird that only 2 bones were found? Like,
Right.
where's the rest? Kind of adds to his eerie reputation that he has. But let's jump back to 1929, and we're going to go into Benny's basement now. So this is where he had his office. This is where he would do all of his medical healing, that kind of stuff. While police were investigating the house, they found a shrine, and this was like a full-blown altar. It had wax figures, and I did see some articles that talked about how these wax figures represented saints.
Oh,
And I will post some photos up on Instagram. They're a little creepy looking.
yeah, I saw that.
Did you see the photos?
Mhm.
Yeah. He also had the planets hanging from the ceiling. So like the celestial, that kind of stuff.
Which makes sense, that type of practice that he's doing.
Exactly. Like the spiritual, like the
Right
reading the
off
stars, tarot
yeah.
cards, that kind of stuff. And there were crucifixes and handwritten religious texts throughout the whole basement. The basement also had green velvet curtains all over, like on the walls. And so I know it kind of gives it a
Creepy, eerie.
dark vibe. Yeah. And so now Benny, like this kind of goes along with the saints, where I question if the wax figures are actually saints. Benny had written his own version of the Bible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a really long manuscript. It had, like mystical writings and prophecies. And Benny had explained to others that he believed he was the one who was divinely chosen to write this. And he called it the oldest history of the world. And it was basically his own occult version of the Bible. That's where I question if maybe they are saints. I don't know.
Yeah, now I'm going back to his degree on the wall. It's like, did you just go to somebody like this and then...
And they made it for you? Yeah, like here's $20, And so he apparently worked on writing this Bible between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. He said that's when he received signs and messages from whatever he believed in.
Okay.
Kind of interesting. Benny's followers, they knew this whole thing that Benny had going on as part of the Union Federation of America. And that is a religious movement that Benny claimed to have found 20 years earlier when he was living in Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
I know, it just sounds like there's so many layers here. And so with this movement, he promised divine healing, held seances, and delivered prophecies, all for a fee, of course. And to the faithful, it was sacred work. To skeptics, they called it a bizarre cult. So, which
I could see that.
Me too.
I would have that, more of that bizarre cult feeling.
Yeah, and then especially when you think to this mass murder that has happened, like this is, feel a little cultish. And so the press, they latched on to this whole situation immediately, and they were printing headlines like religious faker decapitated in shrine room, cult shrine mystery and axe deaths. The press was really leaning on the whole cult religious side of connecting that with why they were murdered. Some believed that Benny had summoned something or someone too powerful. Others whispered that he had finally angered the spirits he claimed to control. Of course, there were talks of possibly the Black Hand, but this is 1920s. That was kind of starting to die out, or bad business dealings. So it was kind of all over the place, of what could have caused this. So,
well, he was involved in a lot, and it sounded like he had a lot of people coming and going. So,
and he had, like you said, a lot of people coming and going for the religious aspect.
Right.
He also had a lot of business dealings going on. So now police, they worked around the clock in those first few days. They interviewed everybody from neighbors, friends, clients, and they even interviewed the family physician, Dr. Thomas, who said that in his opinion, Benny was a, quote, insane man.
Oh, wow. Says a lot.
He said that he did not believe that the children were biologically Benny's, but that they were Santina's from a previous marriage. Now, they were married in 1921. And so the only child that I would question is the oldest, Angelina, because she was born before 1921. However, they could have had her out of wedlock.
Right.
It's just something that you don't talk about in the 1920s. I don't know where the doctor is getting that from, unless he's just looking at Angelina, who was the oldest, who was born before they were married, and just assuming all the children were not Benny's.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
But all the other children were born after they were married. The doctor also told police that Benny wanted to shoot some type of movie out of his house and turn the street that he lived in into a second Hollywood. This is like a whole other layer.
He's going all over the place. A cult type theme to a movie. Well, it could be a cult movie.
That's true. He could be combining the two things. He's a carpenter by trade. He's got this religious stuff going on in his basement. He wants to turn his whole street into a Hollywood set. It's like he is all over the place. But I agree with you. Maybe the movie and the religious thing are tied together.
Right. That would make sense.
The police did determine that Benny was actually the first to be killed due to the fact that there were bloody footprints leading from Benny's office in the basement to upstairs where the rest of the family was. So not long after the gruesome discovery, detectives made what they thought might be a major breakthrough. Late on July 3rd, police arrested 34-year-old Angelo DiPoli and Umberto Tecchio, and they were neighbors and acquaintances of the Evangelista family. What drew suspicion to these guys was the unsettling list of items found in DiPoli's barn. Now, I don't know what led the police to them.
I was just wondering that also.
Actually, I think what happened was somebody came forward and said that they saw the two at the house the day before the murder. And so I think the police to go over and talk to them. Yeah. So in the barn, they found a stained razor edge knife, a short axe, and a pair of shoes that were still damp from a recent washing.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's a little.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And the knife, it was not an ordinary like kitchen knife. It was a curved design, and it was like the type of knife used for cutting bananas from the stalk. So,
Oh, okay. I know what you're saying.
but this blade, it was freshly marked with what appeared to be blood. So detectives immediately sent it off for chemical analysis, but Angelo, he claimed that the stains were from food preparation and denied having anything to do with the murders. Like, what are you cooking with this knife? Like,
Yeah, and why are they in the garage
the barn.
or the barn?
Yeah. So, I don't know. The short axe, it raised alarm too. It was the kind of weapon that could deliver the brutal blows seen in the killings. And the freshly washed shoes, that was really weird to the police officers as well. Angelo said that they were just cleaned as part of his normal routine.
Well, maybe go back to the barn with that knife, unless he was butchering animals.
That's true.
Saying, I guess you could call that food preparation.
No, you're right. That makes
But-
sense. And if you put it all into context, he's got a barn. Maybe he lives like on a farm, which would be why he might have to wash his shoes a lot.
Right.
So,
yeah.
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. But to detectives, the timing was just too suspicious. And Angelo, he never wavered in his denial. He admitted to knowing the Evangelistas, even visiting their home on occasion, but said he had no role in their massacre. Now, as for Umberto, he actually bought a house from Benny and only had a few payments left on the house. So police believed that Umberto visited Benny the night before the murders and also believed that there was bad blood between the two. Umberto, he denied any wrongdoing. But one interesting thing about Umberto was 3 months prior to the murders, Umberto was arrested for murdering his brother-in-law during an argument.
What?
Yeah, he was never convicted of the murder, so that's interesting. So I don't know if they were like, okay, it's a self-defense thing.
Oh.
So, but yeah, like 3 months before.
Yeah, that's not looking good for him.
No, it doesn't look good for him at all. So investigators, they also noted something that deepened the mystery. Despite the brutality of the murders, nothing in the home had been stolen. There was money and jewelry, important papers that were not touched. So, of course, this suggested to the police that the killer's motive wasn't robbery, something more personal, perhaps tied to his religious work.
Right. It would make sense tied to the religious thing more so than if it was a money deal or something. You would think they would have went ahead and taken money if there was money laying around.
Exactly. Yeah, like Umberto with like the money situation.
If it was a bad money deal,
Yeah.
gone wrong.
And why even go into the kids' bedrooms?
Right.
So it definitely feels more personal. And then you think about the covering up the bodies and stuff.
Right.
It's just kind of a lot of weird stuff. So police, they did receive a confession letter. And in the note, the writer claimed responsibility and even gave an address on Lincoln Avenue and said the bloody axe could be found in a suitcase. So I'm going to actually read the letter to you. It says, "My conscience bothers me since I killed that family of 6, so will confess and say I am sorry. I live on Lincoln Avenue on the 5400 block, but I won't give house number because I want thinking time, so search the houses and you will find bloody hatchet in my suitcase. I am ready for the worst punishment I can get. Signed, the murderer." And I read it word for word, so it sounded a little choppy there, but
Right.
I think there was some missing words. So, he doesn't give a house number. I don't know how big Lincoln Avenue is, but detectives did go to Lincoln Avenue, but they didn't find anything. But how many houses? Like I said, I don't know how big this avenue is.
Right. But I don't know. It's all kind of sketchy there. You're confessing, but you're not going to give your address?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your name. Yeah. I think people just like to throw themselves in the middle of these,
Mhm.
like they want to be involved. And it's sad because it probably is a fake and it sends detectives off on a
Yeah.
side tangent and not focusing
Taking away from
the actual investigation. So now a priest, Father Beccarini from a local Catholic church, told the police that Benny would actually come up to the church and talk to him about his beliefs. And he described Benny as crazy. So kind of like the doctor.
Oh, so there's two people.
There's two people, yeah. And he told the police that he believed Benny was murdered by another Italian who thought that Benny had put the Malocchio curse on them. He didn't have anybody particular in mind, but he had heard kind of little rumors in the Italian colony regarding this. So, you know,
well, who knows?
I know it's like there's so many different things here.
And this is a priest.
Yeah, maybe people came and talked to him. They were concerned that Benny was putting curses on him or whatever. And
right.
You never know if they ran into a bunch of bad luck and they were like, that Benny. So just kind of a side note, a woman named Florence Morris, she lived nearby. She was deeply disturbed by this crime. And she actually became convinced that the killer was coming for her next. And she tragically took her own life, leaping from Barlam Tower in Detroit. So it just kind of shows you how the Evangelista Massacre, it shook the entire community.
I wonder if she was a
client.
Yes.
I was wondering that same thing too.
Right. She could have been really close with him and believing every little thing.
Yep.
And yeah.
I was thinking that same thing too. I looked into her a little bit. I couldn't find a whole lot of information. She had children, which is really sad, and a husband. So theories, they flew in from all directions. Some thought, like we talked about earlier, it was revenge. Benny had been known to take money up front for people and may have crossed the wrong person. At one point, a man actually showed up at the family's funeral and was arrested for acting strange. He turned out to be a red herring, though. Nothing there. So
I had to look that up.
A red herring. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a side tangent, like a distraction almost.
Right.
I've never heard that until I started listening to true crime podcasts.
I had never heard of it.
But most people, I think, were convinced that it was religious cult related killing. One article even suggested that Benny had been the victim of blackmail and had refused to pay. The police apparently found a threatening letter in Benny's belongings and believed it may have come from the Black Hand. Now, this is crazy, and I had to add this in because this is the same town. It's home. Yep, same town that Mom and I are sitting in right now in little old Grand Junction, Colorado. So in 1934, Charles Graham, he was arrested in Grand Junction, Colorado for murdering an entire family with an axe. So the chief of police in Grand Junction, he had heard of the Evangelista Massacre and was like, wow, this is very similar. So he actually sent Graham's fingerprints and a picture of Graham to the Detroit Police Department so that they could compare the fingerprints, but they weren't a match. So
that's so bizarre.
I ran across this article and I started reading and I was like, Grand Junction, Colorado, what? That's crazy. Like, that's the town Mom and I are sitting in right now and so far away from Detroit.
I actually looked that guy's name up when I read your script, but I couldn't really find anything.
I found him on some databases. He was just friends with the family. They weren't really sure what caused that. They're just thinking like some bad business dealings or whatever. The house isn't here anymore. It was like on South 9th Street or something like that. But after all that investigating, there were no arrests ever made. I mean, they would like arrest somebody and bring them in and talk to them, but nothing stuck.
No conviction.
No conviction, yeah. Benny's brother, Tony, he came forward and he claimed the bodies. He told the police, though, that he was not close with his brother because he didn't agree with everything that he was doing with the occult and his religious beliefs. I thought this was interesting. The family, they were buried on July 6, 1929 at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Detroit, but they were all buried in one grave together.
That is, I guess they used to do that.
Yeah, I've never, I know that they used to like way back in the day, but I wonder if this was something that like he had written out. I just thought it was so weird.
Yeah, so did I.
But apparently over 3,000 people attended the funeral and detectives, that's a lot, huh? Detectives were present at the funeral as well. They're just kind of looking out for suspicious people. So as time went on, the case only got colder, but the mystery grew. In 1930s, detectives were still searching for suspects tied to the crime. And they even questioned the person who made the wax figures, hoping he could lead them to other followers, but that didn't go anywhere. They would gather like hundreds of fingerprints because they found fingerprints at the crime scene, obviously, so they could, compare them. Suspects were arrested as far away as Indiana, Pennsylvania. They had suspects in Colorado. We know that. And there was even a man who was thought to have committed a human sacrifice in Detroit. He was briefly considered, but never connected to the crime. But in 1935, police floated a new theory that one of the original suspects, Umberto, had been the killer all along. But he had already died, so they couldn't really pursue it a whole lot.
Oh, he's the one with the bloody knife in the barn.
No, that was Angelo. Umberto was the one he bought the house from him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they were arrested at the same time, so I totally see why you thought that. So they claimed that he had left a print at the crime scene, but he was also known to visit the house at times, so it was, kind of hard to confirm that. Now, this next theory blew me away, and I don't want to say that I think that this is it, but it's really intriguing. So police began pursuing a man from the same village in Italy as Benny came from, and they were thinking that maybe he was the murderer because this man, who is Aurelius Angelino, he actually went after his own family in 1919 with an axe, and he ended up killing 2 of his children during this attack.
Wow.
So Angelino, he was eventually sent to a mental hospital, but he escaped in 1923 and was never found.
Oh, creepy. And now, was he living in Detroit or just still in Italy?
No, he was in America. He lived in Detroit, and there was talk that him and Benny knew each other
because they were from the same
village. And when Benny lived in Pennsylvania, there was talk that him and Aurelius still spoke. And so it was all rumors, and they couldn't verify it because they could not find the guy because he escaped the mental hospital. Isn't that crazy?
Well, that's left hanging.
Yeah. And Aurelius's friends said that he had very similar religious views to Benny. So it's really intriguing. Like I said, I don't want to say that I think this is the one, but it's weird.
Yeah, so they never even found that he died or anything.
Nothing. They never found him. They thought maybe he went back to Italy. They couldn't find him there, and they never found him in America. But he escaped in 1923, so it was a little easier, I think, then to change your identity.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
So, it went on and on. They would continue to kind of investigate it for a few years. In 1948, somebody wrote an editorial in the Detroit Free Press, and the headline was, "Will we ever know the truth?" In 1982, the Detroit Free Press also wrote that the Evangelista murders is one of the city's most grotesque and enduring mysteries. So, it's 1929, but it's still making headlines. But there's just so much to this one.
Right.
It's unique. So the house was eventually demolished, but many people believe that the site is haunted. People in Detroit have reported hearing whispers around the area, all of that kind of stuff.
Right, because he had that shrine.
He had that shrine. They were all murdered there. So, Benny, he obviously wasn't a perfect man. He made money off people's fears. He kind of blurred those lines between faith and superstition, and he had secrets that we'll never know. But it's heartbreaking what happened to him and his family.
Right.
No matter what you're into, it doesn't justify that. But like we talked about, it is definitely one of the most mysterious cases we've ever talked about. So that's our story. Make sure if you enjoyed this to subscribe, rate, follow. And like I said, there are some crazy pictures that we'll post up on all social media.
They're good pictures too.
They are. Yeah. They're little, some of the wax figures though are creepy. It's like, oh geez. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to the sad story of the Evangelista family, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.